This is my PSP 1000 external controller mod. Essentially it's a PSP 1000 that I've grafted onto an Xbox One controller, giving it a larger 5-inch screen, second thumbstick, speaker mod, USB-C and a few other little upgrades. First and foremost, the controls. So the PSP isn't necessarily the most uncomfortable system to use, but after a fairly lengthy session I find that my hands start to cramp up, I get pain in my thumbs, and the edges of the console start to dig into my hands. The PSP's single sliding disc of death thumbstick is also not great, and using the face buttons for camera controls in place of a right stick frankly sucks. On the other hand, I find that the Xbox One controller is the most comfortable controller to use. I don't get cramps, I don't get pain or anything, and the thumbsticks and buttons feel great. So to me it felt like a no-brainer to combine the two for the ultimate PSP ergonomics. Nearly every button on the PSP is hooked up to the Xbox One controller, and what with the help of a few little remaps here and there, we have access to every button we need to from the controller. The D-pad is fully working, as well as the face buttons, and select, start, home, etc. The bumpers are hooked up, and I've also found a way to hook up the triggers using magnetic reed switches, so they feel exactly as they should. The PSP's triggers have been repurposed as the volume controls, so the left trigger turns the volume down, and the right trigger turns the volume up. They're also sound reactive with blue LEDs, but honestly, unless it's dark and the volume's cranked, you don't really see these as the screen overlaps half the trigger. I mean, I could improve this, I could add more LEDs, etc., but I'm really not that bothered. If I bend the screen back, you can also see that the sync button has been repurposed to be the brightness control button. The only button that I haven't hooked up would be the note button, and I mean I could have hooked it up to the Wi-Fi switch or the hold switch, but the issue with these is that they're maintained switches, so when you switch them into position they stay connected until you switch them out of that position, whereas the note button is normally a momentary switch, so it's only connected when you push the switch down. So that could have caused some sort of complications, or some, it could have been a little bit finicky. What I've done to get around this though is set up a remap so that when I press the home button and the down button on the D-pad, that presses the note button. So if I demonstrate here, if I hold those two down together, the volume has now been muted, and of course I hold the home button, press the D-pad again to get out of that one. For convenience sake, what I've also done is set up a remap for the volume control. So if I hold home and press the left D-pad, that turns the volume down, and if I hold home and press the right D-pad, that turns the volume up. Home and D-pad up then changes the brightness. Both thumbsticks work too and have clickable L3 and R3 buttons. The left stick, or L3, is hooked up to the select button, and the right stick, or R3, is hooked up to the left trigger. So the reason I've wired up L3 and R3 to these particular buttons is because on Medal of Honor Heroes, which I quite like playing, the select button is used to jump, and tapping the left trigger allows you to perform the melee attack. So I thought it would be quite useful to wire these up to some easy to access buttons. The right stick is where things get interesting though. Of course the PSP doesn't have a right thumbstick, so what I've had to do is modify the potentiometers in the Xbox One controller's right thumbstick in order for them to behave like a series of switches to work in conjunction with the PSP's buttons. Due to this, it does lack that fine granular control that you'd get with a regular thumbstick, as this just behaves like the buttons, so they're either being pressed or they're not. There's no sort of in between. but this will be the same for any PSP dual thumbstick mod. That's also where you might see me flicking the thumbstick a lot, as doing so allows you to make finer movements. Otherwise it still feels like a regular thumbstick, and it works pretty well considering the PSP shouldn't have a second thumbstick at all. As you may have noticed, I've got a switch at the bottom of the controller. This is a mode switch you can use to swap the right stick's function from trigger mode to face button mode. So with the mode switch in the first position, or trigger mode, we can use the right stick to control the camera in games like Ratchet & Clank or Daxter, where you'd normally use the triggers to control the camera. So with a mode switch in the second position, or face button mode, you can use the right stick to control the camera in games like Medal of Honor Heroes or Coded Arms, where you'd normally use these face buttons to control the camera. Moving on to the screen next, we have a larger 5-inch TN panel versus the PSP's original smaller 4.3-inch LCD. So as a bit of a size comparison, what I've done is I've cut out a piece of paper the same size as the 4.3-inch LCD. If I lay that on top of the 5-inch screen, you can see the difference between the two different size screens. While it's not perfect, as you can see, the PSP's front faceplate has been modified to house the larger screen, and the cutouts for the buttons and charge port have been filled in to give it a nice flush finish. The faceplate and LCD assembly has then been given several coats of gunmetal grey metallic spray paint to complete the final look. The 5-inch screen still runs at the PSP's native 480x272 resolution, so you'd think with the lower pixel density the screen would look significantly worse, but even still it looks pretty decent. So the main difference between these two screens is the 5-inch screen is a lot brighter. So at the moment I've got the charger plugged into this PSP so that we can access the highest brightness level, because this isn't a hacked PSP. This is a hacked one, so we can access that higher brightness level without having to have a charger plugged in. So if I just cycle up through the brightness levels, we're at the first one at the moment, second, third, and the last one. And it might be quite difficult to tell through the camera, but in person the 5-inch screen is quite a lot brighter, especially if you have the screen at a slight angle. Speaking of angles, the viewing angles on the 5-inch LCD, they're not amazing. As you can see on the lower angles, the screen gets a bit dark, and on the higher angles, the screen gets a little bit washed out. But honestly, it's not too bad. The original PSP screen does also have some issues with viewing angles. It's probably not as bad as this one. But yeah, the 5-inch screen is still pretty decent as long as you don't use it at an extreme viewing angle. So the screen, or PSP itself, has been attached to the controller by these metal spring hoses, and they allow you to adjust the position of the PSP. On the back of the PSP, I've added a full-range bass speaker. It works in conjunction with the PSP's treble speakers, and together provides better overall sound quality, louder volume, and of course a lot more bass. It also gives you a kind of rumble feature, as you can feel the bass vibrating through your hands. I do also have another video on the PSP 1000 bass speaker mod, so feel free to check that one out. So another unique feature of this console is how it charges. The Xbox One controller's micro USB connector has been swapped out for a USB-C connector, which serves as a replacement for the PSP's original DC barrel jack. So the console now charges by USB-C connected at the controller. I've also integrated the charging indicator into the home button. To finish up the video, in case you were wondering, the PSP is powered by a standard OEM battery, but to be honest I haven't found there to be a significant reduction in battery life when I play around the middle brightness levels. With that said though, there is the possibility that I might modify this with a custom upgraded battery or some other mods in the future, but who knows. A couple of things that also put me off of going down the modified battery route is the fact that I don't actually have a lot of space left here in the UMD drive bay, but as well as that I do actually like being able to easily swap out the battery. If I do add any additional mods though, I will keep you updated. So that's everything. That's all of the features, modifications, information, so thanks for watching the video.